Every year, millions of Panettones come off production lines so fast they almost seem to defy logic. Before a single machine even starts, there is one fact few people ever imagine. In major factories, thousands of tons of seasonal dough are produced every year, including specialty Panettones, some filled with exclusive chocolate blends that go through their own roasting and conching process. During peak season, these lines run on nearly non-stop shifts, turning Panettone into one of the most important products of the holiday season. Tons of living dough move through fermentation tunnels, rivers of melted chocolate flow through the plant, and ovens bake hundreds of units every minute. And the most fascinating part is this: the entire spectacle happens behind the scenes, inside major manufacturers that transform a centuries-old recipe into a modern process of engineering, precision, and industrial control. Welcome to Factories and Facts. Get ready to see Panettone like you have never seen it before. From inside the machines that shape, heat, cool, and perfect this holiday icon. Today, you will discover how the country's largest manufacturers control temperature, time, texture, and fermentation to create that unmistakable aroma that signals the holiday season has arrived. Although every manufacturer protects its own secrets, the industrial process that brings Panettone to life follows some truly impressive principles. And do you know what makes it even more curious? Even at this massive volume, the steps still follow almost artisanal principles, only multiplied on a colossal industrial scale. And if you watched our last episode about apple cider, you already know. When the food industry takes the stage, every drop, every gram, and every second matters. Here, it is no different. Panettone depends on that same precise dance between ingredients and machines. Before we continue, tell me, which ingredient do you think most determines the final flavor of Panettone? Let me know in the comments, and check that you are already subscribed to Factories and Facts, because now we are about to begin this journey behind the scenes of production. Before any Panettone ever takes shape, everything begins with the strict selection of raw ingredients. And here's a detail few people would ever imagine. Major manufacturers around the world have entire teams dedicated solely to measuring ingredient quality batch by batch. Nothing is random. The flour, for example, needs a specific protein content to support long fermentation without collapsing. If the flour is too strong, the dough becomes elastic and difficult to handle. If it is too weak, the Panettone simply will not rise. That is why many industrial producers have long-term contracts with mills that can deliver the same standard every time. The second essential element is the yeast, the true heart of Panettone. Although every manufacturer has its own secret, many use some form of mother dough, also known as industrial levain. It is fed daily and has to be monitored like a living organism. And that is exactly what it is. Millions of microorganisms transforming sugar into carbon dioxide, alcohol, and acids that create its signature aroma. In many factories, this mother dough can remain active for decades and never be fully replaced. It is like a living lineage that follows the evolution of the recipe. Then comes the most flavorful part: butter, sugar, egg yolks, chocolate chips, or candied fruit. The butter needs an exact melting point, so it melts at the right moment during kneading and blends evenly into the dough. The sugar, on the other hand, cannot be too finely refined, or it may caramelize too early inside the tunnel ovens. The egg yolks are pasteurized and filtered, creating a smooth texture that helps the dough aerate. And when it comes to chocolate chips, there is a trick. A process known as bake-stable confectionery, which helps them hold their shape even after the intense heat of the oven. That is why you never find the chips completely melted inside the Panettone. The initial mixing of the ingredients happens inside giant industrial mixers, some capable of handling hundreds of pounds at a time. They work in stages. First the dry ingredients, then the liquids, And finally, the fats. The logic is simple. Each ingredient reacts differently to the movement of the dough. If everything were added at once, the final texture would become unpredictable. To ensure consistency, sensors monitor the dough's temperature and density from the very first minute. If the mixture gets too warm, the enzymes break down and the panettone loses its aroma. If it gets too cold, fermentation will not develop properly. Here is an impressive detail. In the largest panettone factories, this initial stage alone can process more than a ton of dough per hour. Even so, when you watch it up close, the process feels surprisingly delicate. The dough rises slowly, breathes, forms bubbles, gains elasticity. It is like watching an organism come to life. Right after mixing comes the hydration period. The dough is placed in large resting vats, where it begins to become more flexible. This moment is crucial in determining whether the panettone will be soft or dense. The water needs to spread throughout the entire gluten structure, and that takes patience. This is also where the flavors begin to come together. Some recipes allow this stage to last for hours. Others use temperature-controlled chambers to stabilize the process. That choice determines the final aromatic profile. What makes all of this so impressive is the transition between preparing the dough and beginning fermentation. This is the point where panettone stops being just a mixture and starts transforming into something alive, airy, and full of character. From here on, every minute matters, and this is exactly the point that leads into the next stage, where mechanical kneading, dough dividers, and fermentation tunnels come into play to shape panettone as we know it. With the dough hydrated and active, one of the most hypnotic stages in the entire production begins: industrial kneading. While in the artisanal process, the movements are slow and repetitive, in factories, the work is carried out by giant planetary mixers, some with paddles that rotate on different axes at the same time. This crossing motion creates a continuous stretching effect, strengthening the gluten network while incorporating air into the dough. The result is that soft, elastic structure every panettone needs to have. And there is a fascinating technical detail. Sensors installed along the sides of the mixers monitor the dough's resistance in real time. When it reaches the ideal point, the machine automatically reduces speed to keep the dough from tearing. During this phase, the delicate ingredients begin to enter the process. In filled panettones, chocolate, hazelnut, or vanilla creams are added depending on the recipe. In versions with chips, millions of tiny pieces must be distributed with absolute uniformity so every unit keeps the same standard. To do this, manufacturers use a stage called late incorporation, where the chips are added only when the dough is almost ready. That way they do not melt, turn into paste, or leave streaks. In traditional panettones, the candied fruit goes through a polishing process with neutral oils to keep the pieces from sticking together. It is a simple detail, but an essential one. When kneading ends, the first fermentation begins, a moment when the dough transforms right before your eyes. Inside controlled chambers, temperature and humidity are adjusted with precision so the yeast can work at the ideal pace. If the chamber is 1 degree Celsius above the planned temperature, the dough ferments too quickly and loses structure. If it is 1 degree below, fermentation slows down and disrupts the entire production line. That is why many factories rely on climate control systems that automatically correct the environment second by second. And here, one of the great industrial secrets appears. After this point, the dough can never be handled roughly. Strong movements can push out air bubbles and compromise the final volume. That is why the transition to the next stage is fully automated. Stainless steel ramps and conveyors carry the dough to the dividers with as little impact as possible. The dividing machines are a spectacle of their own. Some can portion hundreds of pieces per minute, each one precisely adjusted to the same weight. This precision is critical. If a panettone weighs less than the standard, the customer notices. If it weighs more, the company loses money on a massive scale. It is a calculation that simply cannot be wrong. After dividing, the rounding machines take over, spinning each piece to create a smooth, even surface. This rounded shape ensures the dough ferments steadily inside the paper mold. The second fermentation happens already inside the molds, lined up on huge trays that move through fermentation tunnels. Here, the dough rises until it reaches its final volume, creating that signature dome. What few people realize is that this phase can take hours, and it changes depending on the weather outside. On very hot days, the internal humidity has to be adjusted to keep the surface from drying out. On cold days, the machines work twice as hard to reach the ideal level of fermentation. Before we move on to baking, one of the most critical moments in the entire process, I want to know one thing. What kind of panettone do you prefer? Chocolate chip, candied fruit, filled, or covered with cream? Tell me in the comments and let us know what city or state you are watching from. I am curious to see just how far Factories and Facts is reaching. And now we reach the transition between living dough and a nearly finished product. This is where panettone gains its final shape and prepares to face the extreme heat of industrial ovens. Coming up, you will see what happens when hundreds of units enter a baking tunnel at the same time. A tunnel that feels like a furnace built with surgical precision. With the dough already rounded and settled into its molds, the second fermentation begins. The stage that decides whether a panettone will be tall, light, and airy, or dense and lifeless. The trays enter proofing chambers with carefully calibrated temperature and humidity. Here, each manufacturer adjusts its own parameters, but the principle is the same. Create an environment where the yeast work at the ideal pace. Sensors placed along the walls analyze the rise in volume and make automatic corrections. What is fascinating is that a difference of just 2% in humidity can completely change the texture of the crust and the final shine. Once they reach the perfect volume, the panettones move into the tunnel ovens, one of the most impressive pieces of equipment on the line. These tunnels can stretch for dozens of yards and bake hundreds of units at the same time. Inside, the process is divided into zones. First, a burst of heat that stabilizes the dough. Then, gradual baking stages that develop color, aroma, and structure. The top of the panettone, that rounded dome, is not just for looks. It shows that the internal expansion was balanced. If it cracks on only one side, it is a sign that fermentation happened unevenly. When they come out of the oven, still golden and fragrant, one of the most famous rituals in the panettone industry begins: inverted cooling. The units are hung upside down on metal racks to keep them from collapsing while the dough is still hot and flexible. Without this step, the panettone would lose volume and end up looking compressed. Gravity does the work, and the process can last for several hours. And I do not know about you, but just watching this process, it almost feels like the aroma is coming right through the screen. Before moving on to packaging, every batch goes through strict quality control. Technicians analyze texture, moisture, weight, elasticity, and the distribution of chocolate chips or fruit. Some factories use industrial CT scanners that scan the inside of the panettone to make sure there are no oversized air pockets or empty areas without filling. It is a level of precision that surprises anyone who thinks panettone is a simple product. And since we are behind the scenes of these massive production lines, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps Factories and Facts keep exploring delicious industrial processes like this one. With quality control approved, the final step begins: packaging and the incredible logistics. where you will discover how thousands of units are prepared to fill the entire country with holiday flavor. After passing quality control, each Panettone moves into a stage that seems simple, but is a true spectacle of technical coordination: final packaging. Before it meets the famous holiday box, the still-warm product goes through a resting period to stabilize its aromas and prevent condensation. Next, mechanical arms place each unit into protective metallized polypropylene bags, which act as a shield against moisture and oxidation. This type of film is actually what helps keep Panettone fresh for weeks. It is not just pretty packaging, it is food engineering. After that, the folding machines take over. They assemble boxes at a rate of hundreds per minute, creating that traditional shape recognized in many parts of the world. Once the boxes are ready, synchronized conveyors bring the Panettones and packages together with precision. In some factories, smart cameras automatically identify the ideal position of each unit inside the box, ensuring none of them leave crushed or tilted. Details like this make all the difference in the final presentation. And here comes an impressive stage: bundling. Robotic forklifts organize dozens of boxes into perfect blocks, wrap everything in shrink film, and prepare them for transport. This bundling is not just meant to make handling easier. It also protects the Panettone from vibrations and impacts during the trip. On larger lines, some of these bundles can weigh more than 440 pounds. The precision is so high that even at fast speeds, misalignment rarely happens. With the bundles ready, the logistics journey begins, carrying Panettones to supermarkets, stores, distribution centers, and retail shelves across the country. During the holiday season, many operations move at an accelerated pace, some running 24 hours a day. Refrigerated trucks, although not always required, may be used to ensure the product arrives without changes in texture, especially in warmer regions. Here is an interesting detail. At the largest manufacturers, demand forecasting for each region is done months in advance, using historical data, weather patterns, consumer habits, and sales volume. That is why Panettone can appear in so many stores within such a short window, even in small towns. Another little-known stage is seasonality control. Because Panettone has an extremely concentrated sales peak, usually in the months leading up to Christmas, factories have to adjust their entire yearly operation to handle that surge. Some manufacturers even redirect machines and entire teams from other lines just to reinforce holiday production. And once the season passes, the line gradually returns to normal. Now, here is a curious detail. Did you know some manufacturers use X-ray CT scanners? They are used not only to detect internal flaws, but also to analyze the dough's expansion pattern over the years. They create a kind of Panettone library that allows the company to compare how the recipe evolves, making sure tradition stays intact even as technology advances. It is almost like industrial archaeology for Panettone. After following this entire journey, from the flour to transportation, it becomes clear that Panettone is far more than a simple sweetbread. Would you agree? It is the result of a massive industrial chain, where biology, chemistry, mechanical engineering, and logistics work in harmony to deliver a holiday symbol enjoyed by millions of people across the country. And for you who have stayed with me this far, it is time to end on a high note. Subscribe to Factories and Facts to keep exploring the behind-the-scenes world of the greatest industries on Earth. And tell me in the comments, which part of the production surprised you the most today? After all, your participation is what helps us bring you more complete episodes every time. And if you think you have seen it all, then you have no idea what factory we showed in our last episode. It is already appearing right there on your screen. Click it, and come with me to discover one more hidden secret here on Factories and Facts. A big hug. I will see you there.